Just kidding. Welcome, everyone. This is Josh and Jeannie Rubin, and this is Conscious Nutrition, episode number 10, if I'm not mistaken. So just 10 episodes. You know, just double numbers, kind of like a bar mitzvah. It's kind of cool. And today we're going to talk about fats and thyroid health. If you have never watched this before, that's okay. You can always click on the videos tab on the left-hand side of our page, and when you go in there, you'll see a playlist of all the other episodes from 1 all the way to 10. At the same time, if you're on YouTube, you can go to our YouTube channel. We have all of them uploaded on our YouTube channel in a folder specifically called Conscious Nutrition. Before we get started, welcome. We have a couple, I always forget the word for that.
It's logistics.
Logistical things.
I don't even know if that's the right word. I think it is.
Yeah, it's a good word.
Yeah.
A couple logistical things we want to do before we get started today. As you know, today we are a little bit later. We want to play with this time versus the 12 o'clock to see a couple different things based on, you know, our needs and everyone else's needs. So we're going to play with the times a little bit. But hold on one second. So the first thing I want to do is let you know, as always, that we offer what's called a Restoration Thyroid audio series. It's a free, I think, 7-part or 5-part?
It's a 7-part
series. Audio series on how to use food to restore metabolic, adrenal, thyroid health.
The reason we keep getting that confused is because we really do have 5 phases. So within that 7-part audio series, we discuss our 5 phases. So
okay, 5, 7, yeah. That's confusing for me. No, I'm just kidding. It's not confusing. Anyway, it's wonderful, and it really gives you not only a base and an understanding of our work, but it really gives you a small foundation to get the ball rolling. Because a lot of people contact us, and they're confused about the things we're saying. We'll talk about some of those confusions today. And they want to learn more about our philosophy. And this is really just a good place to get started. Of course, we have 350 YouTubes and all this great posts on Instagram and Facebook and the blog and the newsletter and all that. But this is a great place to really begin to unearth philosophy from food, metabolism, nervous system, and body temperature and pulse. So definitely check it out. I'm going to put that link right below in the comments, and you can check it out. What's up, Googs? Susan, how you doing?
Hey, guys.
As well, one more thing, we offer what's called a complimentary 15-minute consultation. And that's a chance for you to really just kind of get in touch with us, build a relationship.
Well, it's just to kind of explore. Okay, so, you know, now I have an idea of what these guys are doing, and I'm interested. Let me call and talk to them about my specific, you know, issues and what I've got going on and what I've done and how I might be able to help, especially using food, because I think that's what a lot of people, you know, a lot of people coming to us are attracted by, is the fact that we are using food, and it really helps you to establish that nutritional base for what your body needs to thrive.
Right.
So that any other modality or any other intervention that is potentially or possibly necessary for you, at least there's something to work from.
Right.
You know, what I do want to also add to that, is that we are not, it's not designed to answer personal questions about what you're doing in your journey now, and I'm not sure exactly why you're laughing, but it's
because of my phone call the other day.
Well, the only reason, oh god, that was off the chart.
So let me just give you an example. I have to share this. I have to. So we've been doing the free 15-minute consult,
Faylene.
and that link is below. Hi, Faylene, Annie, and Lisa. Thank you for that wonderful compliment. So we've been doing the 15-minute consult since we've been together.
Forever.
So it's like a long time. We're talking 12 years maybe. And, you know, we talk to a lot of great people. We talk to a lot of people that get vulnerable. We talk to a lot of people that just have questions. Well, I probably had the most interesting, and that's the best way to say it, phone call the other day that I've ever had. And I'm just going to summarize it because there's no need to go into the nitty-gritty. So this person had all avenues in place to get healthy, right? But they wanted to know, A, what Matt Stone has been up to because he hasn't been online. B, if I could get in contact with Matt and call him back or email and let him know what Matt was up to, and C, if I could tell this person Matt Stone's body fat percentage and how he's been eating this past year. All
I can do is laugh over it because it's just, it's up there with some of, and that's why I bring it up. Again, we love talking to you guys. Don't get me wrong. Like, we love talking to you guys. But one of the things I think that you're starting to glean on what we do is that we don't do an XYZ approach. It's very, very specialized. And a lot of the times we're doing you a disservice by trying to answer those questions for you, knowing nothing about you. So that's all
so that link is below. As much as I appreciate those phone calls, there's no need for me to talk to someone to answer those questions. So anyway, I just felt like sharing it because it was kind of funny.
It was funny.
Well, I guess it was funny.
Yep.
Anyway, moving right along.
No.
So at the same time, if you're listening now or on the playback, don't forget 3 things. Number 1, we come here every single Thursday, and we will let you know via our list or Facebook or Instagram. It's most of the time at 12 o'clock Pacific Coast time. Today's a little bit later, obviously, for specific reasons. So every single Thursday. Number 2, please like and share our video. Number 1, it helps us selfishly, but number 2, it helps us get this video out there a little more to share with people.
It might help somebody else.
It might help someone else for sure. And number 3, if you have a comment during now or the playback, a question, or funny Diego, what a topic you want for us to kind of go over or talk about, please put that in the comment below. Don't be afraid. Or you can message us privately, because we want to know more. We want to answer questions and help you out through the video. All right, that's why we're here. So today we're going to be talking about fat. Now, there's a huge.
It's a big topic.
It's a big topic.
And I think we got a little overambitious in what we wanted to talk about today, so we are going to chunk it down a little bit. But yeah, it's a big topic. It's a controversial topic. There's a lot of confusion around good fats, bad fats. So we're not coming at it from the point of a bunch of different studies. We're coming at it from a physiological point, a functional point, and why we need fat, and then looking at the different makeups, the molecular structures of fats, and how that plays a role in thyroid health. Yeah. And we have come from it from a point of studies before. And I think it's powerful, but I think that coming from it from a functional perspective, and from our experience of working with people, that that's more powerful in itself. A lot of people are going to ask us about the ketogenic diet and the high-fat diets and all that. That's not what we're here to talk about. We actually did an episode on that, so go to past episodes to look up, because I think it was like the first, second, or third one we did about the ketogenic diet and how our body doesn't really use fats for energy production. So definitely check that out if you want to learn more about that. So why do we need fats? Well, I think from a digestive perspective, it can provide us with many things. We could sit here for a long time and talk about this. But, I think the biggest thing from our perspective, from a digestive perspective, and there's others, of course, is it can really help slow down digestion and keep you satiated. In a sense, it can help you regulate your blood sugar. And when people are having hypoglycemic reactions or hypoglycemic, or food is moving through their system too quickly, the utilization of the right type of fat and utilization of not too much fat, the right amount, can be very beneficial for certain people, as well as people that don't have a gallbladder, right? So, and we're talking about saturated fats, I guess. So from a digestive perspective, it takes a lot for fat to move through the digestive system, and that's why, from our perspective, eating a diet high in fat can be a lot, or a big burden on the digestive system, and really slow down digestion too much. To the point of almost making our system too sluggish. And we don't want that. We want it to work how it's supposed to work. We don't want to manipulate it. So for me, using fats, number one, it helps people stay satiated, but it takes a while to move through, so it actually can help us regulate our blood sugar and sometimes slow down hyperactive systems.
Did you have anything to add to that, or from a digestive perspective?
Other than the breakdown and absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, I mean, yeah, other than that, that's pretty much a very important piece when we're looking to regulate blood sugar, for sure, is the ability for it to break down slowly.
Right.
Yep.
As well, our cells contain, let's just say, fat. We're going to keep it simple. We're not getting into science and talking about all these different things and, what some people believe in and what other people don't believe in. But, fats help to transport nutrients across cell membrane. So usually your cells have a high affinity for more lipophilic fats, like saturated fats. And this is in a metabolic state. And our cells can use those efficiently for many things, as well as producing small amounts of energy when we're in a resting state. And that's how our body uses fats for energy, or we use fats for energy. We're in a too stress state. We're not meeting our body's needs with sugar, because that's our body's primary source of energy. But when our body is in a stress state and our cells become, let's say, just use the word broken, or they're not working appropriately, this is when unsaturated fats, which are more water-soluble, get into the cell and actually can disrupt mitochondrial respiration, or what some people call oxidative energy production, or we just call energy production, right, in the cell. So that's how, and we'll talk about that today, but fats are important, saturated fats, for that reason. In a sense, it supports overall metabolic and metabolic energy health, right?
Yep.
Thank
you.
Thanks, Diego. I appreciate it. Any questions about the Randall cycle? Keep fat low. We'll talk about that. I don't believe keeping that's a really, like, what's low? It's all individualized. Do I believe people need a lot of fat, like 100 grams? Definitely not. I don't personally.
And the interesting thing is, that's what we see a lot of. So that's one of the reasons we are talking about fat today, and all the other macronutrients that we've talked about is the imbalance in which people are eating them, especially when their bodies are in a hypo state. So there is a fine balance. We need them, but how much of them do we need, and where do we need them come from? Right.
So and that's a good point, because I'd say everyone that we get a baseline from, at least 90%, or maybe 85%, they're overeating fat. Right, and that's where all their calories come from, and that's not where we want our calories to come from. Yeah, we use those from a conversion standpoint in a time of need, and that's important, right? We want to have those. We want to be able to, utilize that fat for energy production, in conversion if, we're in a stress state, which happens, but we don't want to be in that state all the time. We want to come back, right? And too much fat can have a negative effect on our system from make it dominant, let's just say, in that one little piece, among other things.
Particularly when we're speaking to people with hypothyroidism or low thyroid function. Because, again, it takes a lot of energy to metabolize fat into usable energy when the body's already in a deficit. So that's, again, one of the reasons why that balance is so crucial in different stages of the healing process, particularly early phases.
And saturated fats play a large role in supporting the immune system. I mean, we could sit here and talk about a lot of different things. They play a huge role in supporting steroidal hormone production, cholesterol production, which plays a huge role in regulating thyroid health, right? You studied the work of Broda Barnes. He talked about how elevated cholesterol is actually a marker for hypothyroidism, because you need that thyroid hormone to draw the cholesterol down. And, of course, we're in a stress state, cholesterol is going to go up, right? So, there's many actions that fats do for our body, and it's important to make sure we get them, but it's also it's important to make sure that we get the right type and the right amount. And then from the nervous system perspective,
I think fats protect the myelin sheath, which is basically what encases the nerves, the nervous system. So again, the types of fats that we're eating are so important to the integrity of the cell, period. And all of the tissues, since all of our tissues.
And that goes back to what not to interrupt her, even though I did, it goes back to what I said about the cells have an affinity for saturated fats, and they don't have affinity for unsaturated fats. And if you study the work of Dr. Dick and Weatherby, he mentioned, and I posted this the other day on Instagram, that one of the most common denominators of all autoimmune diseases, and you can put anything in there, seems to be the damage of the mitochondria of the cell. And he goes on to say one of the most likely causes is the excessive intake in polyunsaturated fats. And that's from one of the lessons in FM Town that he did years ago. But a lot of people think Ray Peat's the only person in the world talking about this, and he's not. And it really just comes to how our body functions. Our cells, they have affinity for saturated fats because they're lipophilic. They don't have affinity for unsaturated fats. When our cells aren't working properly, those fats get in, and then we have issues with energy production, which we're going to talk about today, of course.
And I think structurally the cell, I remember this ratio, I think the cell prefers 45% of the fats coming from saturated.
Yeah.
40% monounsaturated, only a small percent, 5% coming from unsaturated fats. And I think as we continue this conversation, I think one of the things I want to highlight is that we can get unsaturated fats from, they're in everything.
You can't eliminate them. They're in everything.
Eliminate them from the diet. They're in everything. It's, again, I want to just stress this, it's the excess amount that people are intaking up against the stressors that we're coming in contact with on a daily.
And what we're really trying to do, and you'll hear us talk about this in a minute, we're really trying to say, don't eliminate unsaturated fats, because you can't. And you actually need some of these unsaturated fats because they are protective. They are anti-inflammatory. It's the excess amount that's not. So we want our scale to be saturated to unsaturated. We don't want the scale to be unsaturated to saturated. We're tipping in the wrong direction. That excess intake on, I need nuts and seeds, I need vegetables, I need nuts and seed oils, I need olive oil, fish oil. That's not the way we want to go, right? So what's the difference between saturated and unsaturated? Well, it's pretty simple. Saturated, if you think of, we can get technical, it's easy. You think of a school bus.
Keep it simple.
If you think of a school bus, if every seat, we can talk about carbon and hydrogen and, atoms and bonds, there's no need to. If you think of a school bus as a saturated fat, like the carbon and hydrogen bonds, right? So if every seat is full, that is a saturated fat. All the bonds and the hydrogens, everything's attached to that carbon atom. It's saturated, right? From a molecular, point of view. Unsaturated or polyunsaturated, let's say monounsaturated, would be like one seat is empty, right? So we have kind of, in a sense, one position that is slightly unstable, right? Because now we have that fatty acid not bonded to anything. Polyunsaturated means there's like a few, 2 or 3 or even 4 that are not, those seats aren't full, or we don't have that hydrogen bond. And that's what makes polyunsaturated fats so unstable and so reactive to oxygen, heat, light, free radicals, etc., because they're very unstable, right? So another way to think about it is this: saturated fats are harder or more solid at room temperature or cold temperatures, and they're liquid at warm temperatures. So everyone knows this. They leave their coconut oil out. When the summer comes, we see it melt, right? That's a saturated fat from a healthy source, right? Unsaturated fats are exactly the opposite. Why? Because they're in some plants, right? And nuts and seeds, they want to germinate in the spring. It keeps them nice and flexible in the cold. It allows them to thrive just like we do. I was reading Greg Taper's snarky comments like he always does. I always get caught up with what he's saying. I don't know why I try to ignore it, but I can't.
Gotcha.
At the same time, if you think of like a fish, like a salmon that's high in polyunsaturated fats, they need to be flexible, right, when the water's cold. So in the presence of cold, unsaturated fats are liquid, right, or less solid. In the presence of heat, they solidify. And this is why, from a simplistic sense, we are not a fan of the intake of excess unsaturated fats, because as humans, our normal body temperature should be anywhere from 97.8 to 98.6 degrees, right? So we produce heat from a metabolic sense, right? We have oxygen in our system. We have oxygen in our cells. We have oxygen in the 37.2 trillion cells in our body, right? So if polyunsaturated fats are in there, they're going to react to the free radicals, they're going to react to the oxygen, they're going to react to the heat, and they're going to react to everything, right? What do we get? We get instability, we get disease, we get many, many problems from this, like we'll talk about. So that, in a sense, is the simplistic, I guess, definition, would you say?
Yeah, it's just identifying.
Of saturated to unsaturated, as well as
more stable fat. You've got a more unstable fat.
Right.
So you can identify them.
Right.
So, and a lot of you might even experience kind of some of that hardening that Josh was talking about, that stickiness that unsaturated fats can cause when exposed to oxygen. If you've left your fish oils out, or you've left different vegetable and seed oils out, or even around the cap, that kind of gives you an idea of what happens with that fat in those conditions.
So for us, it really comes down to, like, I know a lot of people say, well, saturated fat is bad. No, I agree with people from a point of, like, if you're eating a conventional steak or, I don't know, anything conventional with saturated fat, yeah, I agree. That could be bad for you. But when we talk saturated fat, we're talking about a healthy fat, right? We're talking about what aligns with the human body and what the body can use. We're talking about it from a physiological standpoint. When we're talking about unsaturated fats, we're talking about nuts, all nuts. We're talking about seeds. I don't care if they're phytate. I don't care if they're, I don't care if they're soaked, if they cost $99, if they're from the Himalayas, or monks eat them, right? You can't get rid of the unsaturated fats. We're talking about their nuts and seed oils, vegetable oils, fatty fish, cod liver oil, and, you know, if you read the package of, like, processed foods, you're going to see all these oils, right? Why? Because they preserve better. What would happen if coconut oil was in these foods? A lot of them would probably melt, become sticky, and they wouldn't be preserved on the shelf. And there's a reason for that, right? So from our perspective, when we look at fats, we're thinking about it from a thyroid perspective. Always. Everything is from a thyroid perspective. And not only a thyroid perspective, but an energy productions perspective. Because, like I said, Broda Barnes talked about how thyroid affects every single cell in every single system within the body. Well, I looked up the other day in Google University. I don't know if this is true or not, but it's probably close enough. There's 37.2 trillion cells in the body.
Why did you just throw that fact out? Yeah, so go ahead.
Oh, you thought I made it up?
No.
You thought it was really smart?
You seem to know things.
I just counted them the other day when I was in the bathtub with my bubbles. I was like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... 37 trillion.2.
I knew there were trillions. I didn't know the exact number.
Yeah, I looked it up. I should have kept it to myself. So if you think about it, thyroid hormone affects every single cell in your body. So you can become your own guru and take control of your body by regulating your blood sugar, allowing your body to convert thyroid hormone in your liver so you can use it in every single cell. And what you're doing is you're regulating how your cells are producing energy, right? And this is why we focus so much on the cell. Now, if you study the work of many people online, if you study the work of, I think it's Bruce Fife, there's Ray Peat, there's Dick and Weatherby, there's many people that talk about this. The excess intake of polyunsaturated fatty acids from a thyroid metabolic energy perspective is a no-go. And we're talking about an excess, right? And excess is really, if you're focusing on the over intake in nuts, if you're focusing on a half-to-head cod liver oil and fish oil. I'm not so much of a stickler when it comes to fatty fish, because most people don't eat an excessive amount of fatty fish. Yeah. I'm more a stickler when it comes to, like, nuts and seeds, because they're highly undigestible. Not only from the unsaturated fats, they are highly undigestible. What's up, Ed? Even from the phytate perspective, they do us more harm than good. And, of course, the nut and seed oils and the vegetable oils are like 10 times worse, right? So let's talk about, from a thyroid perspective, why we feel that polyunsaturated fats in excess are actually dangerous. Now, keep in mind, they do a lot more negative things to the body in excess than positive. You know, and we talked about this in our old program, the Metabolic Blueprint, as well as 5 Feet Eco Food. There's a slew, maybe we'll go over a couple different ones through our kind of like going and looking through research, why these are in excess bad for us besides just the thyroid.
Well, I think when we think about how the thyroid relates to every single system in the body and every organ system in the body, we can begin to connect the dots. But, you know, even with hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's, they are a direct result of one or more blockages of your thyroid hormone pathway. And you have 5 different hormonal pathways. You can say the thyroid gland, your liver, your bloodstream, cells, and obviously your metabolism. So those polyunsaturated fats block all 5 levels of your hormonal pathways, which again interrupt the function of the thyroid.
Right.
So I don't know if you want to break each one of those down.
Yeah, we can in a simplistic sense. So from the thyroid perspective, it really blocks the thyroid from making thyroid hormone. It blocks different enzymes, different proteolytic enzymes, and it really affects how the thyroid itself is actually producing thyroid hormone. And this is a problem, right? If we can't produce thyroid hormone, how can we produce energy? If we can't produce energy, then we're always going to be in an inflammatory state. And we've always said this. Instead of taking something to reduce inflammation, because that's why people want to eat unsaturated fats, right? Essential fatty acids, and take these supplements, eliminate the things that are causing inflammation, right? So if you eliminate the unsaturated fats from your diet, from the excess that you're taking in, maybe you wouldn't need them in a sense, right? And because they're coming from so many different areas that we can't even fathom. They're in everything. Start looking at labels. Most people are cooking with canola oil, soy, cottonseed, sunflower, safflower, vegetable oils, right? These are highly toxic oils. And it's very simple if you go online. You're going to find a ton of research to really back up what we're saying here. You know, from a liver perspective, what polyunsaturated fats do is they actually affect the diodinase enzyme. So it affects the conversion of T4 to T3, and this is huge. Now, of course, we've talked about estrogen's effect on T4 to T3, cortisol's effect on T4 to T3, and of course, there's many others, but polyunsaturated fats in the liver affect the conversion of T4 to T3 because it affects the diodinase enzymes, which hold glucose or selenium.
I just wanted to say that it's an entire process. It's not just one thing or the other. When Josh talks about estrogen and cortisol and PUFAs, it's all happening at one time. Because, again, it's the state that the body is in that is interrupting estrogen detoxification or the recirculation. It's cortisol that is affecting thyroid conversion. But it's also affecting metabolism, energy production, to the point where, again, the body is in this chronic state of inflammation where these unsaturated fats are being released for energy purposes. Right. Right? So I just wanted to...
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I mean, the more you eat, the more you become saturated in unsaturated fats, right? Your tissues do. So when you don't eat enough food or you don't regulate your blood sugar, your body goes in a stress state. What happens? You break down your tissues. What happens? Since polyunsaturated fatty acids have a higher affinity for water than saturated fats, they get pulled into the blood, right? What happens from that? Essentially, we cause the stress reaction. And it keeps getting perpetuated. And at the same time, we downregulate mitochondrial respiration or just energy production in the cell because now they're getting into the cell. So we make us... By skipping a meal and not regulating our blood sugar, we make it ourselves more susceptible to not producing energy. So, where was I? So, from a bloodstream perspective, they affect thyroid binding globulin. So now, of course, we can't transport thyroid to the cells. It binds up our thyroid receptor sites. From a cell receptor perspective, and as I mentioned, from a metabolic perspective, they can get in the cell and disrupt energy production. And this is huge because this is what we're looking at with body temperature and pulse. We're trying to see if someone's metabolic. Doesn't mean they're healed. It just means we're moving down the right direction. They're eating in a way that's supporting physiology. They're living in a way that's supporting physiology, and that's what it's all about. So at this point, most people are saying, well, what do you recommend? We don't recommend people using nuts and seeds and nuts and seed oils and cod liver oil. I mean, I haven't really recommended people to use that in a long time. We're not fans of that stuff because we believe... Oh, we used to be. I used to go to the fridge 15 years ago and chug it, right? But when you really do the research, you get unsaturated fats in so many different things, and we can actually convert sugars into essential fatty acids, and so the excess intake of them block our enzymes to produce our own unsaturated fat. So think about that for a little bit. You're actually doing more damage, and it makes you dependent on it, when if you just try to heal your body and come back to homeostasis, right, your body's going to produce it on its own. Like we've always said, from 1847, Dr. A.T. Still said, if you give the body what it needs, nature will do the rest. And that's so true in this
And I think
instant.
that's a whole nother conversation that we might work or do later on, as far as really breaking down the essential fatty acid myth a little bit more clearly, so we can understand how this all came about.
Yeah.
But I think today we're going to keep it a little more simple, because we're getting close to taking up too much of your time.
Yeah, remember, if you have questions, feel free to chime in and put your questions in the comments below. At the same time, if you're watching on the playback, put your comments in the comment section, or questions, and we'll be able to answer your questions within 24 to 48 hours. So I think the last thing before we go into like what should people do, because of course we're like going through physiology, but to a lot of people it's overwhelming probably, and it's a lot of doom and gloom, but it's really not. I think the last thing is that whole essential fatty acid kind of conspiracy, right? And like I just said,
just touched on it.
That we're actually able to synthesize our own unsaturated fats from glucose, right? And if we kind of quote Ray Peat in the sense, because he's a big proponent of this, is that humans have the ability to produce omega-9 fatty acid by the body from unsaturated fats converted to glucose. Unsaturated fats from excess intake of omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids inhibit the enzymes that are necessary to form the protective omega-9 essential fatty acids, right? So that excess intake can actually do us more harm, right? Paul says, you guys ever hear the term carbosis?
I feel like I have.
Remind us, Mr. Googer. What is carbosis? I feel like I've heard about it before. Yeah. So what we believe is this. We believe, since the advent of polyunsaturated fats, right, coming from the paint and varnish industry, that's in what's in paints and varnishes, that's what makes them sticky, and of course they do oxidize.
Stay focused.
I just keep seeing these comments come up. What we're seeing is an increase in thyroid issues, increase in metabolic issues, an increase in autoimmune issues, from people even getting type 1 diabetes at 20, 30, 40 years old, right? And if you study the work of Ray Peat and even Dick and Weatherby, they talk about that excess intake can easily push us and knock out our immune system. So that's another thing. Polyunsaturated fats do is they really inhibit our immune system and put us in an immune suppressed state. So they do so many other things that we could sit here and talk about, but I don't think that there's a point to that. What is this, that we don't recommend them. We recommend people using healthier fats like saturated fats, coconut oil, butter, ghee, etc. Because as they eat squashes, as they eat other things, you're still going to get some unsaturated fats. It's impossible to completely eliminate them, and if you do, from some standpoint, you can actually be doing your own body a disservice. So what do we do? It's really simple.
Well, that's kind of what Greg was asking. So the range that we keep people between, obviously that's going to depend on,
and then adjust up or down a specific range of fats, or polyunsaturated to saturated. I don't know what you're asking, or just in general. So I'll talk, and then when you come up, maybe Jeannie or myself will answer it. So I think the biggest thing is to look at the foods you're eating. Look at the boxes. I mean, we don't eat a lot of food that are in boxes and stuff, but start reading labels, right? And if you're reading your labels, you'll see all these types of seed oils, cottonseed oil, sunflower, safflower, etc., vegetable oil, are in everything you're eating, right? So eliminate them. Right? If you're eating nuts and seeds, cut back on them. They are not digestible, right? They are 100% undigestible. So cut back on them. Lastly, I would say start using more saturated fat in your diet to increase that ratio, but also help your body detoxify unsaturated fats. So use things like coconut oil throughout the day, not in excess. Cook your eggs in it. Eat eggs, eat lamb, healthy organic lamb, because you're going to get saturated fat, beef, etc.
I was going to say, if you're eating animal protein, a lot of the time the fat's there, you only need a small amount. If you are having foods that, again, like a chicken breast or something like that, or a low-fat fish that has very little fat in it, you're obviously going to use more fat in those types of things. So keep that in mind, because I know a lot of people do cook a lot of their food in fat, which brings those ratios or that balance way out of proportion to what the goal is that we're reaching for, especially with, again, energy conversion and restoring thyroid function and conversion. So, Greg, with what you're asking, you definitely have to have the baseline first. And I think this is going back to, speaking to everybody of where to start. Put it into an app. If that's what you want to do versus writing it down on paper, put your food for a couple days in an app and see how much fat you're consuming. And do it per meal, not necessarily for the entirety of the day. You can get a clear perspective there, but I think I see it more clearly per meal with my clients. But I think, you have to establish that baseline first and then work from that point.
Yeah.
I find personally 25 to 30% of the diet should be from fat.
Yeah, maximum. It just depends on people what they're taking in.
Yeah.
I can tell you that if someone, let's say someone's getting 5 or let's just say 6 meals just for shits and giggles. I honestly don't like people going super high. I don't know what that number is, but I would say most of the time I'm trying to get people down. Now, what I do find is this. Now, most people probably want to know a number, so I'm going to give you a number. I don't like a lot of people to go over 75. That's just a good number. Even in the beginning, most people need to be there because they're so high, so we slowly titrate down, right? Because if you cut it out, they're going to be super hungry, and then you eat more to get more calories because fats have more calories per gram, right? So, but what I do find, not in everyone, that is people really get healthy throughout the process. They can actually start, or I should say once they've healed, they can start to drop their fat a little bit, and they don't need as much fat as they typically did because their body is using glucose so efficiently, and using fat at rest so efficiently. Their body's working exactly how it's supposed to work. So Paul said carbosis is when you really go low fat, your body starts using carbs very efficiently. It's from a German doctor. He used this method with diabetics in the 30s. Well, it's interesting you say that because I work with a bunch of type 1 diabetics. I'm working with someone right now, he's 24. And, they all kind of gravitate and do better with lower fat. Just generally. I would say that on average they're getting, my diabetics that I work with, about 30 to about 40, maybe 45 tops grams of fat per day. And this is organically through going through our process. We come to that based on what works for them, how they feel, temps and pulses, their blood sugar. So it's interesting that you say that because we're doing it organically with different individuals. Not just saying we have to do it, it just happens. So I guess we'll wrap it up right here. Does anyone have any other questions about fats or blood sugar or metabolism? I know it's a big topic. It's kind of a big topic to talk about in like 30, 40 minutes, but at least we get everything out there. You can listen to it again. You can post your questions below, but at least give you a chance to understand the difference between saturated and unsaturated, the essential fatty acid kind of myth in a sense. And we're not trying to give you a dissertation, do the research, but we're trying to tell you what has worked for us in our business and what this excess in essential fatty acids can do to our thyroid and our cells.
Yes, he meant for the total of the day, Melissa, just to answer that question really quick.
I mean, on average, I don't like people to go, like, it really depends, but like 8 to 15 grams per meal is a good range for the average person. I think 20 grams is just too excessive. Yeah. I don't think there's a need for it. I think people compensate because they undereat in so many other areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's it. And I think, again, going back to simple changes, just kind of observe what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you find that you are consuming a lot, just pull back a little bit. Start to slowly begin to swap it out.
And just remember, it's hard for us to answer questions like that because the way most people's philosophy work is they'll say, here's your macros, let's fine-tune them. Yeah. This is what we do. We take people through a food strategy, right? And through that, we organically find the macros through fine-tuning that meet their metabolic needs based on all the different things like how we feel, their symptoms, their body temperature and pulse, their logging, their patterns, etc. So that's why sometimes it's hard for us to answer those questions. So don't forget, click on the link in the comments to get your Restoration Thyroid now. We'll be back here next Thursday.
Thanks for taking the time out of your day.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to join us. If you have questions, put them in the comments. And have a great weekend.
Bye, guys.
Peace.